Have we been measuring the wrong thing when we teach children to read? That's not a small question, and if the answer is yes, which I believe it is for many learners, then we have been ticking boxes that do not actually tell us what we think they tell us. Some incredibly capable young people have been paying the price for that for years. So today I want to ask 3 questions that I think every parent, teacher and educator needs to sit with. What does it actually mean to be able to read? What are we missing when we only measure whether a child can read aloud? And what happens to a young person when the gap between those things go unnoticed for years? I want to answer all 3 of those questions today, and I'm going to do it through a case study of an 18-year-old that I worked with recently. She was an A-grade student, hardworking, conscientious, and someone who genuinely cared about her learning and never wanted to let herself or her teachers down. And she could read every single word on a page, fluently, smoothly, without hesitation, but she had absolutely no idea what any of it meant. When she first came to see me, nobody had ever picked this up, not in primary school, not in intermediate, and not in 6 years of secondary school, which, by the way, was at a private school. Because she could read aloud. Tick. Reading? No problem. However, here is what was actually happening behind the scenes. Every piece of schoolwork she was given, she would write out, then rewrite it again, then put it through Grammarly, then she would rewrite it one more time. She would do this for every subject, every assignment, in her own time and at her own expense. She had set an incredibly high standard for herself and she was determined to meet it. So she found a way, a workaround so sophisticated that nobody around her had any idea how hard she was working just to keep up. And the reading itself, she had learnt that reading meant saying the words as fast as she could possibly go. Speed was the goal. Getting to the end of the page was the goal. Along the way, there were lots of mispronunciations, lots of them. And when she had a word she didn't know, she would sound it out. But, however, not quite in the way that we might expect. I remember sitting with her and watching her try to decode the word beautiful. She gave it about 7 syllables. I'm not even sure I can say it properly, but it was beautiful. It was one of those moments that stayed with me because I could see exactly what had happened. She had been taught a sounding out technique and she was applying it faithfully and thoroughly. However, it wasn't accurate and it was impacting not just her reading but her spelling too. Understandably, because if that's the system you have been given, then of course that's the system that you use. So, what was actually going on for her? When I sat with her and asked her to read a passage and then tell me what it was about, she looked at me blankly. That wasn't because she wasn't trying. It was because decoding every word on that page was taking every bit of processing power that her brain had. There was nothing left for meaning, nothing left for comprehension at all. Nothing left to interpret the question, understand the requirements, or connect what she had just read to what she already knew. She was racing through words at full speed and arriving at the end of every page having retained almost nothing. And she had been doing this for her entire school life. An A-grade student working twice as hard as everyone around her, and nobody had ever spotted this. This brings me to my second question. What are we missing when we only measure whether a child can read aloud? We're missing comprehension. We are missing the meaning. We are missing the question of whether what is on that page is actually landing in the brain in a way a child can use. Decoding and comprehension are two completely separate skills, and for some learners, particularly whose brains process information both visually and pictorially, the way we teach and test reading does not serve them well at all. They learn to perform reading. They do not learn to understand it. So, what does actually help when a young person is struggling with reading comprehension? Well, one of the most important things that we did together when I was working with her had nothing to do with reading at all. It was about helping her slow down and set herself up properly before she even looked at the page. Calm, focused, and self-regulated. Her enthusiasm was one of her greatest strengths. However, in this particular case, when she was reading, it was also working against her. She would dive in at full speed before she had even oriented herself to what she had been asked to do. So we worked on that part first, understanding the task and understanding what was actually being asked of her, taking a breath before beginning. And then I taught her a visual technique. Rather than racing through the words, she learned to create pictures in her mind as she read, to see what was actually happening on the page rather than just saying it. And that changed a lot for her because in her brain, like so many of the people I work with, is a picture thinker. And it thinks in images rather than words. When she finally had a technique that worked with that rather than against it, the meaning started to come through for her. She could remember what she had read and she could interpret the question correctly, which meant she could then connect her ideas. So this brings me back to where I started from. Have we been measuring the wrong thing when we teach children to read? When we assess reading by asking a child to read aloud, we are measuring decoding. We are measuring whether they can turn symbols on the page into sounds. That is only one part of reading. However, it is not the whole picture. Comprehension, making meaning from what we read, is a completely separate skill. For some learners, the way we teach and measure reading does not serve them at all. They learn to perform reading, they do not learn to understand it. And the cost of that and loss of confidence and exhausting workarounds and capability that never gets to shine is enormous. She gave the word beautiful 7 syllables. Beautiful. It was one of those moments that did stay with me because I could see exactly what had happened. She had been taught sounding out and it was a technique that she had been applying faithfully, but it wasn't accurate in that moment, and it wasn't impacting, and it was impacting not just her reading but her spelling too. Because if that is the system that you have been given, then that is the system that you use. And it raises a really important question. What are we missing when we only measure whether a child can read aloud? If you are a parent watching this and something here has resonated with you, or if you have a young person who can read aloud but struggles to tell you what they have just read, I want you to know that there is a reason for that, and there is also help. If you are an adult watching this and you recognise yourself in my case study story, the racing through words, the not quite understanding, the working twice as hard as everyone else just to keep up. So I want you to know the same thing. You have not been measured by the right tools yet. That is exactly what I look for. This is what we work on together. Come and find me at Dyslexia Unpuzzled. There is a link below in the description. And if you found this video useful today, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. Don't forget to subscribe and look out for my next video. Oh, like it would be good too. You never know whose life that might change. I'll see you in the next video.